Well, we welcome you to the session on Provisia Rice. And I would say back in the back of the room is a sign-up sheet for any of you that want CCA points. So be sure to sign up now or before you leave during this session. But I'm Alvin Rhodes. I'm Tech Service Rep with BASF, and we'll talk a little bit about the herbicide standpoint. And then I'm going to be followed by Dr. Steve Linscomb that's going to tell you a little bit more about the seed and the development and where we stand from that standpoint. So we're excited. It's been a few years, obviously, that we've been working on this technology. And from the standpoint of the Provisia Rice, we have seen that Provisia Herbicide is in it. And just to clarify with some of you what all this is, there's Provisia Rice, which is actually the seed itself, and there's the Provisia Herbicide. And it's all together combined into the Provisia Rice System. So once we get this terminology down, and we're pretty set as far as the system is concerned. We've had the Clearfield system in the since 2002. So it's been around. Everybody's very familiar with that, and it's done a great job as far as opportunities to control red rice in the rice system. And we've seen a lot of excellent varieties and hybrids that have been brought into the rice production system over the years. But when we're looking at the Provisia herbicide, I want to give you just a little bit of insight into it. And as you know, or those that have been following us for the last couple of years, this is going to be a great supplement to the Clearfield system. And that ideally we'll have the Clearfield rice, which can be controlled red rice with new path or beyond. And then we can have a rotation system over a period of years for a good stewardship management program to have Provisia to control any outcrosses, any wild rice that may be there, or any volunteer rice that may be in rice. So this is an overall program that can work very effectively for controlling a lot of those rice over the long haul. But it does offer a new site of action, a new different type herbicide. Provisia is a grameticide that will control grasses, not the broadleaf. So we're looking at multi-herbicides in the overall program standpoint. It will have some rotational restrictions. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, but it's going to be limited and won't be a major issue to deal with. But the objective is to plant more rice. We've got some areas that have kind of had some problems as far as some outcrossing and other issues concerned. And I think this will fit into the system quite effectively, but we still have to practice good stewardship procedures. So this is a basic overview of Provisia as far as where it is. And we're going to talk about some of these points a little bit closer as we go through this. But it will target a lot of those rice plants. But it also controls other grasses, barnyard grass, broadleaf signal grass, and sprangletop, and others in that process. So that's a good thing. At timing, it will require 2 applications. The first one will be somewhat early, as you've seen from the 2 to 3 leaf rice standpoint. And the second one later, up to panicle initiation, will be the last time. Applications, 2 applications, because it does not have residual, but a total of 31 ounces is the maximum per season. And at the bottom there we talk about tank mixes, and obviously that's been one of the issues that we've followed very closely. We've worked with a lot of the university weed specialists in all the rice growing states to look at what can be good tank mixes for Provisia to control the broad spectrum of weeds that we deal with, and then stewardship guidelines. But as I mentioned, it controls a lot of grasses, no broadleaf weeds, and no residual as this grameticide has. Quizalofop, of course, is the common name of that particular herbicide that we're dealing with. But some of the big grasses, of course, that we deal with all across the Delta states as far as rice is concerned. But the biggest question, I guess, we've had over the last couple of years when we have these meetings and we talk about it is from the tank mix standpoint. Of course, Provisia is a grameticide, and that's always had some challenges as far as tank mix is concerned from antagonism. Basically, we're looking at not so much the broadleaf control, but from the grass side of it. And so we wanted to explore it quite in depth as what we could. And I know this has got a lot of abbreviations in it, so I'm going to kind of give you just a little overview of some of that. In general, we have seen with a number of products, there may be some in some cases, but in not all cases, One of our big objectives, of course, is get greater than 95% control of the grasses that we're dealing with. And this is a summary from the 2016 trials of the universities and all across the states from Texas, Louisiana, further north into Mississippi and Arkansas, and looking at that. The ones that we have the greatest antagonism with was basically anything that has propanil in it or triclopyr. And what we have seen, like in this first bar here, that there is a premix of Provisia plus rice bow. And in that standpoint, it kind of knocked back a little bit on that voluntary rice control is concerned. Not that great, but a little bit. And when you're dealing with grasses, you want to get very good control. And that's obviously an issue that's broken off a little bit there. And most of the others, we're seeing higher than that 95% control that's there. In some cases, we may see a little bit more than others. But generally, what we have seen, if we use them sequentially, in this case, we use rice bow followed by a mix that's got Provisia in it. That second application usually clean up those grasses that were maybe in a little bit antagonized and not controlled as well in the first one. So in general, we'd recommend mixing in that first if you're doing a tank mix, and then being able to control it in the second application with Provisia, any that may escape. But again, there's no residual control, so we really need you to apply those two applications when that time comes for us there. So looking at the overall things, and this is what I anticipate being on the label as far as tank mixes are concerned. There's quite a number of them there. Some things like Prowl, we rarely ever see any mix antagonism issues with that's concerned. Some of the rest of them, on occasion, we may, especially during more stressed environmental conditions that are there. But we've seen coming back on the second shot without one of these in it, it tends to clean up a lot of those antagonism issues that are there. But just some little watch outs that we'll have to be aware of. But the things that will not be on the label will be things that include propanil or triclopyr. It seems that more often than not, you'll see a little bit more antagonism with this, and you'll see a little bit less grass control, and it's going to be some higher watch outs, and we'll discourage those applications. Now, as far as a follow crop is concerned, we've been looking at the standpoint of what type of residual that we do have. And obviously this is a combination of several different type studies, one in the greenhouse and one outside of the greenhouse. We're looking at a total of 31 ounces. That is a full rate, or basically a 2x rate from one application. And in this greenhouse study here, one day after application, rice was planted, and there was a little bit of a response there. So that's one day after application of that 2x rate. 7 days afterwards, still a little bit there. But when you take it to the field in the real world conditions, we've never seen any issues. This particular case, 2x rate applied 2 times, and then planted rice 79 days later, absolutely no responses there, which is more real world type situation that we've seen. But typical brometicide, I don't feel like it's going to be an issue, but we obviously have to check the phyto and all those issues that go along with it. This is a study that was done at Texas A&M. We've had a number of these type studies where we've planted Provisia rice and other types of rices to see what type activity we get. Clearfield 152, hybrids and conventional rices there. And with 2 shots there, it basically takes it out. And we've seen very effective control with it for the other rices. And that's what we're excited for, to control any other rices that you may not want in the Provisia rice. Now this is a kind of a grid study here. I'll just kind of build it just a moment, but what we're looking at is, it was a strip of Provisia rice planted here, Mermentau planted across here, and Clearfield 151 rice planted there. And then we cross-sprayed it with various different herbicide treatments. The first is untreated check, which obviously there is no issues as far as activity is concerned from herbicide. The second one had 2 applications of Provisia at 15.5 ounces. And we did a great job of controlling the Mermentau as well as the other. And obviously if there's weedy rice or something you want there, it's going to take that out as well. From the standpoint of New Path, the opposite happened. It did not hurt the Clearfield rice, but obviously took out the Provisia and the Mermentol there. But we also wanted to look at, what if only one application was applied? We're seeing that, it can control it of the grasses that are up at that point. But there are some downsides. If you just play one treatment early post, but before you flood up, some more grass is going to pop right back up pretty quick, and you're still going to have an infestation of grass in those cases. If you just wait till late and spray at once, you're going to have a lot of activity as far as control at that point too, but a lot of the damage is already done from the standpoint of weed competition with the rice coming up, and it has tremendous effect. So we certainly need to have two applications timely, and sometimes that's a little bit of a challenge to get out there, but good stewardship and good control is going to require those two applications. And of course, from aerial standpoint, we've done a few limited aerial cases, something that has worked well. Provisia rice planted here on the left, and just conventional rice there on the right, and flown on, and it shows that Provisia rice held up under the real world type applications, and the other rice did not. So obviously, we're going to have to be careful of other rices planted in the same area. That's nothing new. We've seen it with the Clearfield system and New Path being sprayed, but it's certainly a watch out that there is some issues with response there. In fact, in looking at this, we did some simulated drift studies. This again is in the greenhouse, but beyond is going to affect those non-Clearfield rices. And Provisia is going to affect non-Provisia rice, probably a little bit more than what the Beyond would in those situations. So it's certainly some watch outs, and have to plan accordingly to not to get that drift, or to plant other crops that it won't be a problem with. So as I mentioned, Squizalofop is the active ingredient that's there. It has a 1-hour rain fast, and would recommend an interval between the two applications, roughly 10 to 14 days from that standpoint of controlling it early, coming back again with that second shot pre-flood. In most cases, that works the best. And avoid drift to other grass crops that are there. Obviously, cotton, soybeans, and rice, it's a 120-day rotation. And what we are going to recommend is don't use Provisia in 2 consecutive seasons, because this is a good stewardship management program. We've seen if you use repetitively use, you've got a greater chance of building up outcrosses and resistance issue. We've all used Clearfield in the past, so you know what can happen, and we've got to practice good stewardship practices here as well. Now, from the rotation standpoint, there's been a lot of discussions about what we can do, and some may be longer periods of time, multiple years. But in the overall situation where we don't have a massive issue at this point of outcrossing, our basic thing is to start with soybeans, plant Provisia rice, and you can plant other rice after Provisia rice the next year. But obviously, you can't plant other rice after Clearfield rice. You have that 18-month rotational restriction after Clearfield rice, and the same sequence will be there also. So our basic standpoint is, if somebody planted Provisia rice in 2018, they should not have Clearfield rice there in 2017. So be aware of that, and come from soybeans or some other type of mode of action. Herbicides that are used there controls that, and residual herbicides often work, of course, in soybeans. And then through various different type rotation schemes there for the good overall management standpoint for stewardship. So another study Dr. Eric Webster did at Esterwood this past year is he had a 4-year study of looking at different rotation systems. And this basically overlays a lot of the different schemes that he used. Not to say that that's all of them, but he's seen in a case where there was a lot of weedy rice or outcrossing in those type of situations, that if you follow these management systems, you can control a lot of that and bring back Clearfield into the system over a period of time. But it takes good management systems, but it can work, and we can look forward to getting it back into Clearfield in many cases to supplement a rotation with Provisia. But from the stewardship guideline standpoint, you're all familiar with the Clearfield aspects of it. It'll be very similar from the standpoint of Provisia. We have plans in place to work with Horizon Ag as far as the marketing program is concerned, and their system that they have used with Clearfield will be very similar to what we anticipate happening with Provisia. Really the only difference here is we recommend not using ACCA herbicides in the rotation crop in the soybeans because, you know, again, using the same mode of action year after year is a system that can set up as far as resistance is concerned. And we know that on every crop, every type of discipline, that's something we've got to be cautious of using. So, you know, this is where we are. The herbicide itself received a registration about 2 weeks ago. So we have the herbicide registered this year. We anticipate launching the Clearfield or the Provisia system in 2018. This year we anticipate is being a seed increase for certified seed, and things seem to be on track for that to coming about in 2017. Dr. Lipscomb has been working very diligently over the last few years of getting some good quality Provisia rice seed, and he's going to share that in just a moment. But in 2018, you know, we expect to launch it to be a limited launch depending on how much seed that we have for that. But we'll have a good program in place, and we think it's going to be a great opportunity to supplement the Clearfield Rice System. Any questions that we may have at this point? Well, if not, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lipscomb.